Hello everyone, my name is Sam and welcome back to the Central Network. Today we have another explained video for you which is going to be based around the character Mordin Solus from the Mass Effect universe. The story of this witty alien geneticist is quite possibly one of the most impactful pieces of writing ever to be produced by Bioware. Now sit back, relax, because this is about to get awesome. Mordin Solus was a member of the alien race known as Salarians, which are said to rarely live past 40, due to their shorter than human lifespan. However, Mordin was allegedly 50 years old when we encounter him in the games, a very impressive milestone by any Salarian standards. Mordin's personal story begins when he enlists with Salarian intelligence, where he was assigned to a Special Tasks Group, or STG for short. Mordin actually served with Captain Kirahi, whom Commander Shepard encounters on Vermeer in Mass Effect 1. They would execute recon missions against the Krogan on Tuchanka to observe and maintain the effects of the Genophage. The Genophage is a Salarian-made plague that specifically reduces the amount of successful births among the Krogan. This was over 1,000 years ago now, and it was the duty of the Special Tasks Group to ensure that the Krogan didn't evolve or adapt to the Genophage, which was completely within the realms of possibilities, given the natural cell regeneration capabilities of our warrior alien race. Mordin and the STG eventually found evidence that proved the Krogan were breeding much faster now. The effects of the Genophage were weakening as the Krogan grew stronger with each passing moment. The decision to create the Genophage in the first place was based on the fact that the Krogan are a highly aggressive species that think starting fights is the best way to make friends. Controlling their population was the only option better than mass genocide. Mordin's time with the Salarian intelligence also included research, mainly into genetics, and as you might imagine, genetics on Krogan. Being part of the STG didn't mean Mordin was any form of soldier. However, they are trained to defend themselves and neutralize enemies if need be. The majority of our Salarians' time spent was analyzing data and observing. Mordin was of course trained in many areas, which led to his extensive list of professional titles: geneticist, scientist, professor, teacher, field researcher, operative, to name a few. Mordin was eventually considered an excellent scientist among his people, one of the best. Mordin's personality was one of humor, compassion, and ultimately, logic. He always worked towards doing the right thing, which is why he personally stepped in to fix the Genophage problem. Mordin assembled a team of many like-minded individuals and more, such as chemists, sociologists, and mathematicians. With their combined efforts, Mordin was able to create a modified version of the Genophage in a week. Mordin's ultimate justification for completing this work was so nobody else got it wrong. Only he and his team could do this right. The task was monumental and had to be done in secrecy. If news arose that a modified version of the Genophage was created, then all-out Krogan riots were likely to happen. With the modified version of the Genophage in hand, Mordin's new task was to deploy it across the Krogan homeworld, Tuchanka. The plan would be to perform covert drops, infiltrate and infect clan centers, and also infect the water supplies. Mordin himself was part of the deployment group. He encountered and experienced Krogan resistance. Regrettably to Mordin, he got blood on his hands that day. His mission to deploy the modified version of the Genophage was complete, but eventually he would second guess whether or not it was the right thing to do. It was in Mordin's character to be challenged. He didn't like easy work. So eventually he retired from the STG and Salarian intelligence to settle into a more humbling role of helping other people who are sick, using the power of his mind to create cures and medicine. This led him to work on the asteroid Omega, where he faced extreme circumstances, yet it would serve as an excellent distraction from his past decisions. There was a plague that was infecting aliens on Omega, which strangely didn't affect humans at all. Regardless, Mordin had limited supplies, territory wars happening around him, and he couldn't love the difficulty level anymore. He very much enjoyed being pushed to his limits and needing to adapt and overcome new situations. It's traits like this that attracted the attention of the elusive man, which is who sent Commander Shepard to recruit Mordin Solus on Omega. to assist with defeating the Collectors, cueing Mordin's entrance in the Mass Effect 2 game. While Mordin was on Omega, he hired an assistant to train under him while helping with the situation. His name was Daniel, but Daniel was kidnapped by members of the Blue Suns mercenary group. Mordin was disappointed about this as he saw potential in the young man. Before Mordin accepts to leave Omega to help Shepard, he requests that Shepard helps him first with the plague. In fact, Mordin had already prepared a cure for the plague. The new issue was that the Vorka were guarding the area where Mordin needs to disperse the cure. Naturally, there is only one option here. Mordin was interested in Commander Shepard's offer because he already suspected that the Collectors were responsible for the plague on Omega. Mordin had concluded that the plague was engineered, and he further suspected that it was being used as a test to see what species it would affect. Given the complexity that goes into it, Mordin was able to deduce that the Collectors themselves have the means to produce a bioengineered weapon like this. After his work was completed on Omega with the help of Commander Shepard, Mordin agrees to join the crew aboard the SR-2 Normandy. Before getting to the final mission in Mass Effect 2, Mordin encounters many scenarios along the way. Interestingly enough, Mordin once thought Commander Shepard was flirting with him, so he led him down gently by pulling him aside in the lab, letting him know he's not interested. But if he ever were to decide to try human, he would go to Commander Shepard first. However, if you play as FemShep and decide to romance Garrus, Mordin will feel obliged to have a very awkward conversation with you about why you shouldn't, swallow the stuff that comes out of your Turian lover. It couldn't get any more awkward than that. I think this just further proves that Mordin sees knowledge as a very valuable tool, and one that should be shared in every appropriate situation, or inappropriate. So other than that, just like everyone else, Mordin has hobbies and other small things in life that he enjoys. In fact, Mordin very much enjoyed observing art from other cultures. He namely enjoyed the opera of Gilbert and Sullivan by Humankind. Mordin's passion for these things didn't stop there. Oh no, he actually used to sing. Hit it, Mordin.
I am the very model of a scientist Solarian. I've studied species Turian, Asari, and Batarian. I'm quite good at genetics as a subset of biology because I am an expert which I know is a tautology. My xenoscience studies range from urban to agrarian. I am the very model of a scientist Solarian.
His friends would encourage him to sing fast-tempo verses and high-pitched notes. Can't imagine why. During his adventures with Commander Shepard, Mordin came across intel that said one of his former students, Malon, who worked with him on the modified version of the Genophage, had been kidnapped by a Krogan warlord on Tuchanka. Fearing the worst, Mordin felt obligated to help rescue his former student, especially considering uncovering the truth around the modified version of the Genophage was a risk too far to take. After bringing this news to Commander Shepard, they formulate a mission plan to evacuate Malon from Tuchanka. After fighting to get to Malon, Mordin was shocked to find out his student was unharmed, with no sign of injury or torture. Upon this rare occurrence, Mordin Solus was stumped as to what was happening. He thought his student needed saving. However, Malon had actually gone to Tuchanka voluntarily to help cure the Genophage. Malon had sore feelings about the work done around the Genophage at the time. At the time, he wasn't able to speak up about his concerns. He was merely a student in the shadow of the great Mordin Solus. Malon had looked up to his teacher and had now decided to take things into his own hands. Mordin was absolutely furious about this. The entire team that worked on the modified version of the Genophage had agreed that the work needed to be done. The work of the Genophage wasn't clean, but what Malon was doing was much worse. Experiments that had gone wrong, torture and murder of innocents. Malon was blinded by duty, whereas Mordin was able to tell the difference between what's right and what is wrong. Or at least that's what he liked to think. Where we draw the line. Malon's work on a cure couldn't continue, so Mordin did what needed to be done, and killed his student. An act he didn't want to do, but had to. It's possible for Commander Shepard to interfere and prevent this. Malon's work was recovered and stored. There was no point in letting the data being destroyed in vain, of those that had suffered. It would also prove useful if it were to ever be needed in the future. The Solarian species have short lives. This reflects in how they treat a day-to-day situation. Despite the fact that killing Malon was a huge emotional blow for Morden, he was able to process those emotions and deal with them all in the time it took them to get back to the Normandy from Tuchanka. Some may see this as a heartless way of life, but this was just part of the Solarian biology. This was something they were naturally able to do. However, it would of course vary from person to person, or Solarian to Solarian in this case. Carrying on with his work back at the SR2 Normandy, Morden was mostly tasked with finding a way to stop the Collectors. His research discovered that the Collectors are genetically modified Protheans, which was a massive revelation to the crew, and most of all to Liara, given her passion and interest in the ancient race. The discovery was very interesting to Morden as a geneticist. The Collectors thus far have been a mysterious, aggressive alien force that not many people have seen and lived to talk about. So to figure out who they really were was quite the revelation. The Reapers were known to indoctrinate people, but keeping an alien race alive over 50,000 years, genetically modifying them, removing their organs as they become useless, and replacing them with Reaper tech, was all really quite horrifying. After making this discovery, Morden became fully committed to the cause of defeating the Collectors. Morden looked at the Collectors as an abomination that needed to be eradicated for the good of the galaxy. Morden also expressed that what had happened to the Collectors was really the final insult to Protheans after wiping them out 50,000 years ago. Helping to eradicate the Collectors was something Morden saw as an incredibly worthy feat, and just possibly as his first step toward redemption. Eventually, Morden and the crew would enter the Omega Relay, which would begin their assault on the Collector base. They had made all the necessary preparations. Depending on what choices you make here though, Morden could end up with an early meeting with the afterlife, which would have massive consequences later on, which we'll talk about soon. But if you make good choices, and a few cutscenes later, Morden lives to tell the tale of he and Commander Shepard's crew saving the galaxy. After departing from the SR2 Normandy and moving on to the next chapter of his life, Morden began contemplating his work on the Genophage. Possible the situation with his student has somewhat affected the way he sees things. You see, his student Malon had taken a few things too seriously around his teacher's ideals. Morden's firm belief was that the end always justified the means, but how we get to that end is also very important. If you remember, earlier on I said that Commander Shepard could prevent Morden from killing Malon. Well, if you do this, Morden later thanks you for it, after seeing the good Malon could achieve, proving that Morden likely feels guilty if he was allowed to kill his student. Eventually, Morden had decided to begin making things right with his past, and to help the Krogan with a cure. During Mass Effect 3, Commander Shepard is sent to a Solarian base to help Erdnot Rex liberate a female Krogan named Eve. This Krogan had been tested on by the Solarians. Shepard was surprised to see Morden greet him inside the base. As it would turn out, Morden decided to return to STG as a special consultant, because once again, it had to be Morden. Someone else might have gotten it wrong. Also, Morden had been feeding information to Clan Erdnot as an inside source, so they could keep the political pressure up on the Solarians. After a tango with Cerberus at the Solarian base, Morden was able to once again return to the Normandy and would continue to work on a cure for the Krogan. Malon's old data, some tissue samples from Krogan, and a lot of hard work later, and Morden creates a permanent cure. Nothing short of amazing for this very model of a scientist Solarian. The next step is to disperse it. With some hard thinking and discussion in the war room upon the Normandy, Morden remembers that the Turians once used a machine called the Shroud to disperse the Genophage over 1,000 years ago. In an ironic turn of events, Morden suggests using this machine to disperse the cure instead this time. It would be effective enough to reach every air particle around the planet. The Shroud was originally made by Solarians. Its purpose was to repair the atmosphere on Tuchanka. Morden once said that all life is precious, and that the universe demands diversity. The entire crew heads to Tachanka to disperse the cure right away. There was a Reaper in the way, but Calros, the mother of all fresher Moors, was around, so don't worry. Morden heads into the Shroud and makes the final preparations. If Malon's old data was never recovered, then unfortunately the female Krogan Eve will die. Some time before the crew left for Tachanka, a Solarian political figure contacted Shepard to ask them to allow a sabotage on the cure. Regardless, Morden detects an issue and is able to resolve it, but it comes at a heavy cost. This moment belonged to Morden. While discussing with Shepard the ethical standpoint on the cure, Morden yells out that he made a mistake. Now it's time to fix that, taking brave steps towards the elevator that leads to the pinnacle of the tower. Morden inhales a deep breath and prepares for his final mission: disperse the cure. The sabotage the Solarians had planted was a kind of temperature malfunction, causing the tower to explode, giving our very model of a Solarian scientist a send-off he truly deserves. There is only one way to keep Morden alive, and that only happens if you made some bad choices beforehand, such as killing Rex. You see, if Rex isn't the leader of the Krogan, then that means Reeve is instead. And Reeve is bad news for everyone. He's hungry for war and has absolutely no love for Solarians. Curing the Genophage with Reeve in charge would result in a high chance of conflict with the Krogan after the Reaper threat. This is the only way to convince Morden not to disperse the Genophage. It takes a lot of convincing, as Morden himself says, will not sacrifice Krogan for political gain. However, it is implied that he will still deploy a cure, just not right now. The conclusion here is Morden goes into hiding while working on the Crucible, but you won't see him again. In the end, Morden turned out to be one of the best companion characters ever written, with such a huge meaning to his backstory that is more than impactful on the greater plot. Did you know that Morden leaves you a datapad with some messages attached? You can find it in your apartment from the Citadel DLC in Mass Effect 3. Be sure to leave a comment, guys. Thank you very much for watching my Morden Explained video. Let me know which Mass Effect character you would like to see next. We would really appreciate it if you would consider subscribing. It really helps our videos be seen by others, and that's the best thing to do if you enjoy our content. Stay awesome, folks, and I'll catch you in the next one.